Right.
Okay, CG, good to go.
Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to Product People's weekly community event. I am Shiji Bomi, Product Manager Intern, and I will be moderating today's session. I'm going to start with today's agenda. So firstly, I'll introduce Product People and what we do. And then we'll move on to the presentation, which will be followed by a Q&A session, and finally a networking session. So Product People, we help companies discover and deliver great products. We do this through our engagements, and we do a whole, sorry about that. So here at Product People, we help companies discover and deliver great products faster. And through our engagements, we do the hands-on and glamorous work of a product manager on an interim basis, usually between 3 to 12 months. We onboard fast, align teams, and deliver outcomes. We also have a large product community of about 6K members, and we encourage them to share knowledge generously amongst each other. We have a very diverse team from different industries, and yeah. These are also some of our current clients or customers. We have Scout24, Zalando, Finiasha, Techstars, and just to mention a few. We're also currently hiring for product managers. So if you're looking to take on a new challenge, feel free to apply at productpeople.join.com. All right, so today we have with us Doug Wieand. He's a senior PM at GetYourGuide, and he'll be talking about managing a technical product. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks for the intro. Should I take it away? Share my screen?
Sure.
Cool. Yeah, nope, wrong one. 1 second. Bear with me here. Still the wrong one. How embarrassing. I split it out into 2 different windows so that I could see. There we go. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. Yeah, I'm going to go over like a little bit of my role, what I do at GetYourGuide, also explain what GetYourGuide is for those of you that don't know, and then some things that have helped me over the years I've worked here and in my career in general. Some tips I have from like working on some technical-ish products. I say technical-ish because I'm not actually a technical product manager, but I actually happen to work in a very technical area. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So in this presentation, yeah, I'm just going to go over a little bit like who I am, what do I do, and yeah, what have I learned? So my name is Doug. I'm originally from the US, from Boston. I studied in Ohio, also in New York, and then I did some like exchange semesters all over the world. Then I worked in Vietnam and Brazil. So I actually had sort of travel baked into my DNA from a fairly early age. And then I did an MBA at Cornell. And I've been at GetYourGuide as a product manager for 3.5 years. Prior to that, I was working in a startup in Boston, also in tours and activities. And I actually did my like MBA internship at TripAdvisor. So I've been in the tours, activities, and travel space for quite some time now. When I was hired at GetYourGuide, I was actually the very first PM hired to do the supply side of things. So we had a bunch of PMs over doing the traveler side, which is like the app and the website. But it had been a long time since they'd had a product manager on the supply side. And now the team has grown into around 3 PMs. Also, if you have any restaurant tips for literally anywhere in the world, please send them to me. I'm obsessed with restaurants. My Google Maps is like almost impossible to navigate because there's too many green pins. So yeah, send them. Okay, but enough about me. Let's talk about GetYourGuide. So GetYourGuide is on a mission to give the whole world access to incredible experiences. And a little bit quick overview of what GetYourGuide is. So we are the world's largest single focus online travel agency. What this means is that we are focused exclusively on tours and activities and not on things like flights, hotels. There are some great other OTAs out there that do that, but that's not us. We are the market leader in Europe. and a close second in the US behind TripAdvisor, actually. We were founded in 2009 and have grown to over 550 employees on a bunch of product teams. We have offices all over the world. You can find tens of thousands of bookable activities on GetYourGuide, and we've sold tens of millions of tickets. You can also, and you can find it all over the world. We have inventory in over 150 markets, and our customers come from 181 source markets. And you can find our inventory. It's actually all curated, and you can find it in many different languages. And we allow customers to book in a lot of different currencies. And we actually don't just sell directly to customers. We also have distribution agreements with blogs, airlines, other travel agencies. So sort of a wide network of distribution partners. And we also have 24/7 customer service. So if you're ever in traveling in your next trip and you want to find something fun to do, definitely book with us. Moving on to the product side of things, though, we have three main verticals that GetYourGuide. So we have the supplier, the traveler, and growth. Within that, there are 15 product teams, of which I am the PM for 2, so approximately 13.3 of those teams. But a quick overview. So the growth teams are building product around all of our marketing infrastructure. So this is like paid search, display marketing, stuff like that. Also all of our distribution partners and everything on that side of things. The traveler is the app, the website, everything that the customer interacts with. And the supplier is how our suppliers onboard their activities, how they manage them, how we make sure we have up-to-date pricing and availability. And this is actually where I specialize. So my teams are, broadly speaking, dealing with getting and storing pricing and availability on GetYourGuide. We do this through interfaces. We do this through other automated means, which I'll get into in a second. But that's sort of what I do. I'm the availability and pricing product manager at GetYourGuide. We set up our teams at GetYourGuide, I think, like a lot of companies. So we're cross-functional. We try to staff the teams to succeed as much as possible. So not every team has all of these roles, but if the team needs these roles, they're available. For example, last quarter, I was working on a project that was very, very back-end technical heavy. We didn't really need a UX writer, so we didn't have one. But now that we're shifting more into working on interfaces again, we're staffing up with a researcher, we're getting writing and design on board. So the teams are fluid based on the needs, but overall, we try to have a complete pizza, if you will, and the recipe being ownership, autonomy, agility, and speed. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the two teams that I am product manager for, and then some of the, I think, learnings I've had over the past few years. So first, I'll give a quick intro to this team. This is the availability and pricing platform team. So the availability and pricing platform team manages all of GetYourGuide's infrastructure around pricing and availability. So this is how we get all of the pricing and availability on GetYourGuide, including ticket upload, including the storage of pricing and availability from connectivity, which I'll talk about in a second, and then all of the other core pricing and availability and deals actually and discounts and all the infrastructure around that. We also build out the internal interfaces for people to manage that. And then we build out the external facing interfaces for the suppliers. So we have suppliers or the ones selling activity on GetYourGuide, the interfaces so that suppliers can manage this themselves. And the top problems I think that we're currently working on and that are in focus are first having products that are actually not available. And this is due to, or they don't have pricing parity. And this is actually because our internal teams don't have quality access to pricing and availability information, which might surprise some people here because we're a company based around selling activities that have pricing and availability, but there's actually some big infrastructure hurdles that we have that have caused us to not be able to have this ready for all of our internal teams. So this is what we're doing right now. We're actually transforming pricing and availability into real-time streams so that everybody can have access to it. And so that our marketing teams can sell products that are actually available and not send customers to pages where there are unavailable products. So that's a very, very important area that we're working on. We're also making the interfaces that the suppliers work on a lot easier and more user-friendly to use. For the customer, this means that they actually have more activities. We actually find that when suppliers have the ability to set up activities more easily, they're actually going to do more of that. And so customers will then have more availability and pricing, or more availability, more activities, and better prices. And that's the third thing we're working on, is a lack of pricing parity. So we actually want to make sure that suppliers can set up their products to have the right pricing, and pricing that matches the marketplace, and also have access to things like different kinds of deals and discounts that are more in line with what they're selling elsewhere in the marketplace. So we're constantly doing research. We're trying to understand supplier problems and trying to build new interfaces and new kinds of deals, discounts, inventory configurations, so that we can sell the broadest range of products. Cool, moving on to connectivity. So I'm gonna take a step back and explain like what connectivity is, because I think it's a very cool topic, but sometimes people like my parents get very lost. So I'm gonna start off with the most basics. If you're a supplier, you're probably working on towards an activities operator, what we call suppliers. You probably have software to manage your business. So you set up all of your activities, you set up how much availability those activities have, and then you can take bookings from many different channels. So not just GetYourGuide, but even our competitors like TripAdvisor or Booking.com, or even phone calls or hotel concierge desks or Internet Explorer. I don't know why, but maybe you're getting from Internet Explorer. But anyway, they have to manage all this in a centralized place. And so that's what they use this software for. And what we do is we connect to this software, and we actually get in real time availability and pricing from the software, so that we can see exactly how many spots are left for our customers. And then we send through bookings to that software so that the suppliers have all the information they need to fulfill the booking. So what does this mean in terms of like a conversation? It actually is very much like a conversation. So what we will do is ask the system, how many spots do you have left? They'll say, oh, we have 8 spots left at this time slot. Please update your availability. And then they will actually notify us proactively sometimes when we should update our availability on our side, so we always have the best possible and most recent availability information. And then for the bookings, we will send them first a reservation. So we'll say, hey, can you hold 2 spots? And this time varies based off of the system that we're talking about or the supplier. And then we will send through the customer information and everything someone needs for a booking when the customer actually makes a booking. And we actually connect to hundreds of these systems all over the world. And managing that connectivity infrastructure and making sure that we're able to scale is really what my job is. It's trying to figure out how can we build scalable infrastructure to do that. And for the customers, connectivity actually has a lot of concrete gains. So for example, it allows customers to access a lot of the top supply, museums, attractions in the world that actually wouldn't work with us if we did not have connectivity. It also, as I mentioned before, allows them to have up-to-date availability. It allows them to have short cutoff times. So what this means is, how long before an activity starts am I able to book? With connected products, the time that its customers are able to book is actually usually within a few hours, or even 0 hours or 0 minutes before an activity starts. But we find with non-connected suppliers who have to go through emails or don't have a live inventory for us, these can be as long as 10, 12, or even 24 hours. So for our customers, it means that they can book last minute and they can book with confidence in destination. It also means touchless entry. It means that we can get the barcodes from the suppliers, and the customers can take those directly to the attractions and get in. And it means that we can get up-to-date pricing. Some attractions are actually very sophisticated and have implemented dynamic pricing, so yield management. And these prices change so frequently that the only way to update them is over connectivity. Plus, there's lots of new features and exciting things that I think we're looking to implement in the future. Sometimes though, and this is the other thing that I work on, the connectivity doesn't always work so well. So there are actually errors that the customers see, including this horrible error here. Oops, something went wrong, try again. This is actually something that customers will see if a reservation fails. So there are times when the customer is trying to book something and for whatever reason, the connectivity doesn't work properly, or we don't have up-to-date information. And minimizing those is something that my team is also focusing a lot. And this is actually interesting. Like, you might be sitting here thinking, why are we listening to a product manager during a pandemic for travel? And actually, travel has really roared back, but it's changed. So as activities and attractions reopen, and as people start traveling again, the way that they travel is different. So most museums now have implemented timed entry, whereas before you could just go in at any time. So we need to get those time slots over the API or over connectivity. As I mentioned before, having the voucher on the phone means that they can have a contactless entry experience. And this is something that you can really only do, once again, with connectivity. And again, like with fewer staff at a lot of the attractions and fewer staff in the tour companies, having the ability to do things digitally has also helped them a lot. Last, as I mentioned before, it's easier to book stuff last minute if it's a connected product. And this is something that, if you want to make last minute travel plans because you're not sure if like restrictions might change, having connectivity really, really helps there as well. And the two main, like I would call it product areas that have allowed us to really, really scale quickly, and we did scale extremely quickly in the last 3.5 years, are these two, I think, main systems that we built. So we built a way for systems to build an integration to GetYourGuide. So in order for suppliers to connect their activities, the systems need to first have a connection with us. We used to be doing a lot of this work ourselves, and we basically turned this into something that the systems do. Mostly, the majority of systems now build to us. And the way we did that was actually build an entirely self-contained integration service platform that suppliers can do everything from, or systems can do everything from register to complete their integration with no hand holding. And it resulted in a much higher quality integration than we had before. We also flipped the way that the suppliers connect their activities to GetYourGuide to a self-service environment. And we built out self-service tools in what we call our extranet, or our supply portal, where they log in and manage their activities. We made this a completely self-service process. I'll show you a chart that's pretty cool in a second of what kind of impact that had, but it was pretty big. In terms of customer problems and focus, so again, I think the errors I mentioned before, this is definitely in focus right now. Making sure that the availability we have is synchronized with the external systems is an ongoing struggle for us, and we're working, I think, with everybody in the industry to try to figure out how to optimize this. And we have a lot of like product development around trying to make sure that customers have few or no errors. We also, again, we build self-service tooling so that suppliers can get on board to GetYourGuide, get their activities connected, and then customers can book those activities. And last, we are building out infrastructure around consuming prices dynamically over API. And this allows suppliers to do sophisticated things like have dynamic pricing. So a few learnings, because I think we're running a little low on time, but just a few things that I've learned working at GetYourGuide for 3.5 years. So I think first thing is when you're working on a technical subject in a vertical of the organization that's actually not technical. So I am a product manager. My boss is head of product, and there's the CPO. It becomes very, very, very important to communicate the technical work you're doing in a way that the business stakeholders can understand. And what do I mean by that? So here's an example, I think, of something that we evolved over time, and we gained a lot more, I think, clarity on our impact and a lot more, I think, buy-in from stakeholders. So in the beginning, we were only really monitoring errors. So we were sort of reacting when they got very bad, but we didn't kind of have any long-term tracking set up. One thing we decided to do was really double down and implement longer-term tracking and really understand where the errors are happening, what the error rates are, and actually start to invest in reducing them. But we still had this metric, which was the % error rate. So we were going to senior stakeholders and saying, hey, we need some more, we're prioritizing features to lower this error rate. We need more engineers to work on this error rate problem. And I think everybody could agree that customers experiencing errors is bad, and everybody sort of was on board with us investing in it, but they were not totally bought in to this idea that this is like one of the most important things we could be working on. So then what we did was we actually went to analytics and we said, can you figure out how much actual revenue is lost from these errors? So not just what the error rate is, but actually, like, can you build out a metric that calculates how much revenue was lost? I think this was one of the biggest changes that I think I noticed was once we had this in hand and once we could go to senior stakeholders and give a definitive, we're losing this much money. This is like the return on investment if you put more engineers on the team. I think this was a big game changer for us. So I would recommend, like, if you're working on a very technical area or an area where you don't have, where your stakeholders don't have that much visibility, try to quantify it, especially if you can quantify it in customer impact or even better in financial impact. Next with the self-service tooling. So always love to show this chart because this was quite a wild ride. So as I mentioned before, we have self-service tooling so suppliers can connect their activities. In the old days, so in like when I first joined GetYourGuide, 2018 and beginning 2019, we were actually had an operations team that was doing this manually, which was an enormous pain, and they were not fast. So you can see here, they were able to do like 50 max. There was one like week where they did 135 and it was crazy. And what we decided was like, let's trust the suppliers to do this themselves. Let's see if if we give them a tool, will they adopt it? And what we saw was just absolutely explosive growth and adoption of this tool. So we went from having a minority of our supply connected to a majority in a very short time frame. So I want to say probably around a year. And every day, and this is a weekly view, so you can just see like how many more activities were being connected every single week than we were ever able to do ourselves. So I think this is a big takeaway for me, is that when you have operational processes, and as a product manager, when you can identify what your internal teams are actually working on, try to see if there's a way that you can actually shift the burden, or actually, in this case, it was actually empower the suppliers to just do this themselves, because this is what they want. And it made no sense for them to have to come to us to do it for them. And I think this applies across many industries and in many, even in non-marketplace model product. I think it's really important to allow people to do things themselves. Last, this is a question I get asked a lot. It's like, you know, I mean, I was a philosophy major undergrad, and I have an MBA, but I'm not technical at all. And people are always like, you know, well, at my company, we actually don't even have product managers working on connectivity. Like, what's the value of having products working on this more technical topic? And I actually think there's a lot of value. I think the value kind of boils down to first challenging the impact and understanding what the business problem we're really trying to solve is. So I think there's a lot we could work on within connectivity, but really aggressively prioritizing and understanding really what problems we're trying to solve. And also like what would the advantage of investing in, like, say, like technical debt be? So I think processing all of that and prioritizing it you can do that without having any understanding, I think, of what the actual technology itself is, outside of, I think, a surface understanding, which you do need to have. But also you can challenge engineers and engineering teams to think about, like, what are the different ways of tackling this, and what would the pros and cons and costs and benefits be of doing these different approaches. I think thinking through more modeling and different scenario planning, I think is also something you can really bring to the table. And I think one thing is I always, I think every product manager gets told this, we got to be like the no person. And that applies to me as well. So always challenging, I don't know, let's say, I don't know what the technical, I don't really understand the technology that we're proposing to add to a project that will increase the scope, but I do understand like what the business impact of that technology will or should be. And so we can make decisions based off of that, whether or not to increase scope or whether to say no and try to keep things limited to an MVP. Last, I think product managers are great at unblocking teams. So for example, we were working on a year-long project to shift to availability streams. I think I mentioned before. And I think just was speaking to the engineers, and we were getting really stuck and trying to understand where we were blocked, and it was hard to get answers. And I think then we just sat down and figured out, oh, actually, we need more domain experts and a couple more people to come help out. And as a product manager, you can really go on a campaign internally and drum up support for the initiatives you're working on, and then ultimately get more help and support. And I think that this is something that, as a product manager, you're in a very good position to do. So that's something else I would advocate for, is always be sort of the cheerleader for your team, always help your team get the resources that they need to unblock themselves. That's it for me. Thank you for listening to my talk. I'll hand it back over to the product people team.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doug. So we're just gonna go straight into the question and answer session. But that was really valuable. And I think something that was really valuable for me as well was where you said, if you're having trouble communicating something that's technical to sort of your business stakeholders, a good way to, get them to understand you would be to communicated through business numbers or business terms or through metrics they're more familiar with, like ROI or customer impact. I think that was a really good point. Yeah, so I'm just checking to make sure we have some questions here. It appears that we don't have questions right now.
I have one. Maybe meanwhile people can formulate their own. So Doug, about that point, I like that when you said that, yeah, like investing into like the technical side of it to be able to perhaps like add value, even as a non-technical person. But then have you had any instances where, let's say, the fact that you're not yourself a technical person did not allow you to see or discover that this technical addition, I mean, despite the added value that it would bring, but it would also bring some technical complexity and maybe like bring us back to the errors or to the complications that we might face?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Like I think I've run into that in the past, but I think my best tactic against avoiding that, which is probably the more useful thing to talk about, is having like the best possible, closest bond with your engineering manager possible. Because I think that's one great thing about having a very close relationship with your engineering manager is really having them help you bridge that gap. So I don't necessarily need to understand everything myself, but I do need to have somebody that can explain it to me in a way that I can understand, right? And I find that having a really strong engineering manager that can translate technical work or technical initiatives into business impact so that you can make decisions is vital. If you don't have that, I think you can still work with your team. It just probably requires a little bit more legwork on your part. I think really going in and spending some time with them, having them explain everything. I think, yeah, I think you can get to the bottom of what you need to know without having like a detailed understanding of, let's say, like how Kafka streams work, which I sort of have a surface level understanding of, but on a fundamental level, don't have like a very, very deep knowledge. Gesundheit.
Well, thank you for answering the question.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we have another question from Wieand, who says, how did working remotely during the pandemic change your workflow as a product manager?
Yeah, so we shifted completely to remote very early on. I would say it was an adjustment in the beginning, especially for me. I personally, I love going into the office, and it was tough in the beginning not to be around the teams, obviously. But I think the engineers actually were and have remained very productive. A lot of them really like going in or staying at home. Don't want to do the commute. The ones basically, as things started to reopen, we've allowed people to go into the office if they want to. So I think people that want to go in, go in. But yeah, I think, but personally, I definitely have felt the loss of the in-person meetings and the brainstorming and all of that. On the flip side, it does make it a little bit easier to focus. So I actually think during the pandemic, I was able to work on some things that maybe I wouldn't have been able to focus on as much, like I think longer term planning. Also at GetYourGuide, we went through, of course, a period where there was almost nothing happening. Not from a development and tech side, but from like a booking side. And actually this was sort of allowed us to work on some longer term projects that otherwise we wouldn't probably have prioritized. And that was great. I think that actually set us up very well to scale in the future. So that was sort of a shift in the way that we worked. But ultimately, I think the outcome was actually setting ourselves up very well to succeed in the future.
Great, thank you. So we have another question, which says, how did you prioritize which streams or booking systems to integrate into your platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a very strong strategy team and sales team at GetYourGuide. So we have a very, very large sales team all over the world. And I think our strategy team and our sales team work very closely together to come up with which are the top attractions or supply that we really want to onboard. And that makes it a lot easier to prioritize which systems that we want to onboard first or maybe onboard later. We also, again, as I mentioned before, we built a lot of these self-service tools so that we don't have to make this choice. In the past, we actually had to, I think, look very closely at, okay, here's what we think the projected revenue streams of having this system on based off of the suppliers they have will be. But when we shifted to having self-service tooling so that anybody could build an integration to us without us even having to approve it. That basically allowed basically us to shift a lot of the prioritization decisions to the suppliers. So suppliers then, if they were, have a strong relationship with us and wanted to get their inventory on GetYourGuide, just build the integration to us and we don't need to do anything. So I think that was also a very big game changer when it came to like expanding our connection portfolio quickly without having to make too many tough prioritization decisions.
Great. So we have another question. This is from Adebayo. It says, as a PM, it's important to keep an eye on the technical debt for your product. Do you incorporate how to manage your technical debt into your roadmap, or you let the engineering team manage that themselves?
I mean, I definitely incorporate it into the roadmap when it is planned. So I think technical debt, sometimes is planned and sometimes sort of just pops up. Usually, I think hopefully it's more planned than popping up. But I think, yeah, it's definitely built into the roadmap. We also, work out with the engineering manager. Like I try to make sure that we're setting aside enough time to work on technical debt when it's important. But that being said, I think this goes back to really challenging technical debt and understanding like what is the business impact of working on technical debt. There's always tons of technical debt you could work on. That doesn't necessarily mean you should prioritize it. So I think my role is really to challenge the technical debt, not to say that we're not going to do it, but just to say, what do we think the business impact will be? What do we think, where will this, if we do this, where will it take us? And maybe will it allow us to move faster or something like that? But that's usually my approach, but we do build it into the roadmap. We, always when possible, try to save some bandwidth to work on it when it's really important to work on.
Great. So we have another question. It says, as a product manager in a technical product with a non-technical background, how do you test your product and how do you ensure that what should be delivered is already delivered?
Yeah. So I find that you actually, in terms of testing, you usually can do it. You need to have your handheld. So for example, I'll go back to these streams that we're shipping now. Like, I definitely can't set up the testing environment that we need to set up in order to test it, but I can sit down with the engineering team or the engineering manager and we can walk through it together and make sure that all of the business cases are covered. So I think that's really where the product manager can contribute, is like understanding like what is the user acceptance testing, making sure that we're covering all of the possible areas that we should be covering and not missing anything. And then making sure that we're delivering on those user acceptance criteria once the product is close to being shipped. So it's not always, sometimes it's not a question of testing it yourself, but more setting up the testing criteria and making sure that those are being fulfilled. I trust the team, if we say like, we need to test this, do this test, and they say we passed the test, like that's enough for me. Like, but it's, I think, more important that we covered all of our bases and didn't let anything like slip through the cracks.
Great. So we have another question that says, what qualities make a good product?
That's a very general question. Yeah. I would say, like, maybe speaking specifically for GetYourGuide, I think, product market fit in our case is what made GetYourGuide extremely popular. And I think what continues to make it a good product. I think you have, before tours and activities were online, and even once they went online, just very difficult to find them and to just go somewhere and sort of see the complete array of activities that are available, and then be able to trust that those are actually good activities. Like I can think of so many trips I've taken where I didn't know like which was a good tour to take, and then I just sort of took a random pamphlet out of my like hostel, and then it wasn't like a very good tour at all. So I think that the demand has been there for a long time. And I think finding that product market fit and really delivering value to the customers, that's a litmus test of whether or not it's a good product ultimately is do people use it? And then I think improving on it. So I would say GetYourGuide is a good product, and in the future, what will make it like exceptional is really, I think, going from serving a basic product market fit need to really like delighting customers with the product itself. And this is something that I think we already do to some degree, but we can really improve on and do more in the future.
Yeah, I like that, delighting, customers part. So we have another question that says, can you talk about a challenging situation as a PM that, and how you've tackled it?
Yeah, sure. Lots of challenging situations as a product manager, like almost every day. Actually, I'll give you an example from today, actually, because what I was doing right before this. So I won't, without giving any names, like we're struggling to figure out whether we should build an integration to probably like one of the largest attractions in the US. Some people on this call, you may have visited it. It's very big. But we had communicated at the beginning of the quarter that due to limited resources, we weren't going to be building any integrations this quarter at all. So I think obviously there was a conflict because the stakeholders, specifically like sales and business stakeholders, this is a really important attraction. We need to we need to have it eventually for sure. And then there was the fact that we had committed to doing none, and we already had a roadmap. And I think the way to manage this, or at least the way I tried to manage it, was really, I think as a product manager, you always have to bring the trade-offs to the table. So I think, someone comes up and says, we have this new attraction we need to build. It's like, okay, we could build that. Absolutely. If we build that, what are the trade-offs going to be in terms of our roadmap and what we're going to be able to ship? And I think then it becomes a question of the stakeholders really building a case for doing this, right? So it's not enough just to say we need to do it. I think it's actually saying, okay, we need to do it because it's going to make this much money. We need to do it now because if we don't do it now, there's going to be these consequences. And I think doing that involves getting everybody into a room. So that's what we were doing today, which is sitting down and really having this discussion and being very open. I think saying not saying no, but not saying yes, just saying, what are the trade-offs? What's the business value of this versus this? I think everybody's sitting around and discussing that. Usually, I think actually, hopefully you can work to an outcome that everyone's happy with.
Okay, so this question is not very specific to the presentation, but it's essentially just advice. How do I, as a graduate in business, go about finding a job in a PM role or go about becoming a product manager?
I'm probably not a great person to ask because personally, I think I was very lucky. I think I actually, funny enough, went into business school wanting to work at TripAdvisor. When I was living in Vietnam, I was using TripAdvisor all the time. And I kept thinking to myself, this product needs so much work. And I was like, is there a job that does this? And then turned out I was like, oh, that's a product manager. And then that I ended up going to business school. And I basically only really applied to TripAdvisor and somehow got that job. And that I think the answer to your question is once you have a foot in the door, it makes it a lot easier than I think build a career. So again, I was a product management intern at TripAdvisor. So my advice, I think there would be as a graduate business, get your foot in the door, even if it's an internship, or even if you're starting off on a lower level, just get your foot in the door. I think build some experience, and then it makes it a lot easier, I think, to get the next job that you want after that.
Great. So we have a question. We have one question about self-service essentially. And, it goes, how do you manage quality assurance with a self-service system where basically stakeholders can input anything?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So the first answer to that is do not let them input whatever they want. So I think there's a difference between self-service where it's total chaos and very guided self-service. So I would say we do the latter. So we were very careful about what information people can input into the self-service tools and how they do it. What you don't want to do is just basically open up the floodgates and just let everyone do everything, because that will result in lots of problems, I think is probably what you're alluding to. So, but from the quality assurance standpoint, I think, first of all, you do as much as you can yourself. So you set up a bunch of testing scenarios and user acceptance testing, and then you start off with a limited set. So in our case, we'll ship it to a small subsection of our suppliers to do some testing there. We always uncover stuff we missed. It's inevitable. So we will iterate and fix things, I think, then roll it out to a larger audience when we feel like it's more ready to go. Of course, we always find stuff in there. So again, it's an iterative process, but I think phased rollout, number one, and two, making sure that you have really thought through as many use cases as possible and structured the interfaces so that they're not resulting in like garbage in, garbage out situation is important.
Thank you so much. Actually, in the absence of additional questions, I think I'm just going to throw in one more question from my end, which essentially is, when you talked about self-service, I had a thought, and it was essentially, how do you decide, or what are the metrics you use to decide when to build a self-service application? So what are some things you look out for and think to yourself, you know what, this is something stakeholders can do themselves?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing, for example, when I showed the self-service connection tool that was like operations before and then self-service after. I mean, the reason we decided to prioritize that was just looking at ticket volumes and looking at throughput for the operations team. So the operations team, not only, as I mentioned before, was like just unable to accommodate the number of requests that were coming in. They were also very slow with executing on them. And I think, and they were also unable to do other things that they were supposed to be doing because they were spending all their time working on that. And all of those things are measurable, right? The ticket volumes are measurable. The time spent working on it is measurable. And then the ability to not work on other things is measurable in terms of like not being able to set up OKRs around things that you really want to do. So I think the key though is to measure it. So one thing we did was like tag everything. So we weren't really doing a lot of tagging on the operations side before, but we decided like, okay, let's figure out what all the buckets of work are. Let's tag them. Let's track how long it takes for them to go through. And that made it a lot easier than to say, okay, well, the operations team is spending, 75% of their time doing this. Then we go to the engineers and we say, can you turn this into something that is self-service? And they say yes. I think that makes it a lot easier to then say, okay, we should work on this.
Thank you so much, Doug. So in the absence of additional questions, I think we're just going to go into the networking session. Sorry.
All right, guys, so I'm going to end our live stream, so you can feel free to return your cameras on, whoever wishes to do so. Just give me a moment to do that.